In this short demonstration, I'm going to explain the PACT feature of generating a requirements tracing matrix. I talked earlier about how the tool kind of facilitates this idea of linking as you go, linking the requirements as you're developing them to the system requirements from which they came, linking the source code to the requirements that they implement, that kind of thing. So the tool encourages that as you're moving through the development process. It's sort of a develop as you go. As you're developing, you're linking these items. So if you follow this process, which is highly recommended, you can utilize this auto requirements tracing matrix feature. So I am back down inside of our avionics passenger counter project, and I'm inside the hardware item, which is the controller board. And now I'm going to click on the requirements tracing matrix feature. So this puts us into a little visual window, a little bit different than some of the other things that we've seen. By default, all of the linkages are set. So if you want to view the full trace matrix of everything as it currently stands, you can just simply click the view button. What happens is a new window pops up, and all of the information about that has been linked so far in the project appears. So if I go back to my original window, the way that report was produced was forward, is the way it shows here. Systems down, basically highest level to lowest level. You could link them in reverse as well. It's just how you want your report to show. So those are some options that you have. Some other interesting items that we've implemented, and we're using terminology that might be supported by other tools in the industry that people are familiar with, is you can take a look at what is not inlinked. And inlinked is a kind of a strange word. Basically what it means is that it doesn't have an upward trace. So that whatever the item is, it doesn't link upward to anything else. So with everything selected here, let's just see what items we've developed that we haven't linked upward. In this case, it looks like there's just one requirement 34, that doesn't have an upward link. So it's probably not derived, so there's probably an issue there. Someone needs to look at why that is, where that requirement came from, if it just hasn't been linked or if it truly is a derived requirement. Not outlink, that's another interesting option. So outlink basically means that it doesn't link to anything downward, right? So let's take a quick look at that to see what's produced when we click that for everything selected. Okay, so it looks like there are a number of requirements that don't feed down into anything else. So with that, this feature is kind of interesting for a project manager who might want to understand where we're at in terms of the project development. So looking at these not outlinked requirements, that they don't feed down anything else. They're not linked down to source. That basically means they're not implemented yet, and there's no test cases for them. So you can kind of quickly see, it looks like maybe about a third of the hardware high-level requirements have not been implemented, or at least haven't been linked to an implementation yet. So the project manager can kind of quickly do a scan and go, okay, we're behind in our project. These things need to get implemented quickly, that kind of thing. You can also look at test cases that don't have test procedures that call on them as well. So anyways, this outlinked is a great way for project managers to keep track of what hasn't been developed. Inlinked is a great way to understand what might not be connected, what's additional functionality, what might be derived, and those things all need to be rectified before you go to your audit, where the certification authority is going to come and check your trace matrices. So these are the good things to make sure that you look at and take care of. Like other items, well, hang on, let's look at derived first. Let's take a quick look at what might be derived. Looks like we have a couple of derived requirements. So several that are derived that wouldn't have an upward trace. And one of the other features that I've shown repeatedly in other pages is export feature. So like all these other, any data that you have, it's really easy to export it for external review, to copy and paste into documents, and you always have the same formats: HTML, PDF, CSV, and XLS. In this case, if we're going to do a full traceability matrix, you probably want to produce an XLS format, and you can just, again, click on that, it pops up. Usually, just to warn you, the format is pretty ugly, so you're going to have to go in and do a little formatting to make it ready for either documentation inclusion or an external review. But you can see from opening this that it's all of your information is basically there. You just need to format the rows and columns and all of that kind of stuff. Oops. Okay. So that's about it. As I mentioned before, this is a really interesting feature. It gives you some really great reports. You can minimize risk by clicking on your not in linked. You can figure out your project status by not out linked. You can look at the list of derived requirements. You can export to various formats. But all of this depends on you following the recommended process of linking as you develop. So every time you create a requirement, immediately link it to the system requirement. Every time you develop a test case, link that to the requirement that it tests and the conceptual design. So all of these things have important connections. That's all part of traceability, and PACT provides a very good infrastructure for all aspects of developing this requirements traceability matrix.